And we are ready with Hour 3 with Tim Alexander. Tim, let's start talking about all the important stories we talked about this morning before showtime.
Some very important stuff. We have a massive nuclear-armed U.S. Navy armada farming off of Yemen, as claims that the Royal Saudi Air Force has used a tactical nuke on a key military site in Yemen's capital, and has also killed many Yemen children with chemical warfare dropped by Royal Saudi Air Force planes.
With our support, by the way.
Oh, of course. The latest two basic announcements today from the Saudis: their Operation Decisive Storm in Yemen, that is the aerial attack by Royal Saudi Air Force, has ended, although they say that they can it can begin anew at any time. And there's a new phase underway, which is Saudi-led ground forces will be going in. They've called up and activated, or called out, the Saudi National Guard. In Saudi Arabia, they have the regular army and the National Guard. It's not like the National Guard here. It's a full-time force. It's actually the larger of the two and is the best equipped. Of course, all their equipment is the best money can buy, because they have all kind of billions and billions of dollars to spend on armament and have. They are determined to go in. I think they popped the nuke in the capital of Yemen because they have not been very successful in their air campaign. The so-called rebels, and I need to back up before I get too far into this. The so-called rebels are actually the forces of the guy that was president until maybe a year ago, when he was overthrown in western Baku, and the so-called current president was put in. He was generally hated by the Yemeni people and was overthrown. He fled to ADEN a couple months ago, and then left the country, went to Saudi Arabia. And the forces that took over, they simply reoccupied their capital, are being called by the Western media the rebels. It's somewhat similar to what you had happen in the Ukraine, where you had an elected president that was overthrown by the NATO-backed so-called coup junta.
Right.
Now, there are several really interesting things about this. One, and Veterans Today late yesterday came out with a very interesting analysis of the strike that was supposedly made on a arms depot of Scud missiles in Yemen. They showed in a video, and by the way, if you want to see it, it's on my site. Just Google Large Sterling Europe, and it'll get you to my news blog. But the explosion from the missile or bomb from the drop from the Royal Saudi Air Force jet, there was only one explosion. It wasn't a series of explosions, and it was a massive explosion with big.
There was a mushroom cloud and everything
going up. Well, it was
mushroom cloud and everything.
Of a tactical nuke.
Right. So in other words, what is also a message to send to the potential allied enemies of, but remember now, Saudi Arabia and Israel are lockstep in the same purposes of the globalists. And it is the purposes of Obama to set up a Sunni Muslim caliphate. Now, there's a conflict between the Shiite Muslims, which include Yemen and Iran, and the 5 republics, basically, of the former Soviet Union, are all basically Shiite. People need to understand that. They all look to the mullahs of Iran as their spiritual leaders. And also a lot of the spiritual holy sites are in eastern Iraq, where the majority of the population are Shiite Muslims. So the great war between Shiite and Sunni is on, and this accumulation of this force in the Gulf of Aden is a prelude to the accumulation of a force up in the Strait of HORMUZ, which I can tell with no uncertainty.
You're completely right. You got ahead of me, though. What I want to do...
I want you to go into that, because... I want you to do the background on this, because, people need to understand the background, because you're the military strategist. When they hear this strategic analysis, you better take notice of it, because it's a prelude to an economic chaos, a war in the Middle East, and a closure of the Strait of HORMUZ.
Well,
and these are
remember over 100 years ago, the former Confederate General Albert Pike from the American Civil War, he was a high-level Mason and a Satanist. And he wrote a letter that was published, or what actually was the letter itself was on public display in the British Museum in London until one of the Rothschilds got appointed to the board of directors, and then it mysteriously disappeared. And that letter talked about 3 world wars that were necessary to establish the demonic New World Order. And he pretty well described World War I, World War II. The Third World War is a clash of civilizations, a battle between Christians and I forget how the term they use, but basically the Muslims. This is what's being set up. And it's being set up by getting the 2 main factions of the Islamic faith to fight one another. We've had a series of press articles in the mainstream media, which, as everyone knows with half a brain, is essentially a propaganda arm for the globalists and Zionists. We've had a series of articles how they're beheading people, they're torturing Christians, much of which I believe is true, but also much of which, including many of those, the most recent ones, have been shown to be forgeries. But whether they're true or not, the purpose behind them is it's a psychological operation to prepare the public to demand, not just to accept, but to demand war against these Islamic extremists. That's how the groundwork is being laid, and it's working. I've talked to friends that don't read that much. Why these stupid so-and-so Islamics, these, et cetera, et cetera. They're people getting fired up. Okay, so...
And, of course, the next major event is a 9/11 event. 9/11 event on American soil where a radiological or biological weapon will go off. And we have literally cells from Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Al-Qaeda, and these ISIS across the border in Mexico, and 37 civil detention training camps with live ammo inside the continental lower 48 states. So when people want to say it's a conspiracy theory, I want to slap them. I am so sick of people who think they know better and they know nothing, or they haven't been there in their first-hand place, or know just exactly how. This is in the open media. You can actually just research and find out the open media that our president has left the border wide open to Muslim terrorists getting in his country.
They crossed the nuclear threshold within the last 24 hours, and this is a major step. Now, they've tried to say that this was this arsenal of Scuds blowing up, but the point that Veterans Today article made, and I agree with their analysis, is not only was the blast consistent with a tactical nuke, the mushroom cloud was very consistent. Looking at the buildings nearby, I would say it was somewhere between 75 and 100 stories high. Wow. But the color of the cloud, this was very important, because when Scud missiles burn, the chemical propellant produces a rather ugly yellow-brown color. And if you detonate something over them and they blow up, you're going to see multiple explosions, but the mushroom cloud would be yellow-brown. And a mushroom cloud in and of itself doesn't automatically guarantee that a nuke was used, because you can get a mushroom cloud with really big, high explosives.
Right.
But this is consistent with the use of a tactical nuclear weapon by the Saudi alliance, which includes us and Israel. And that is a big step.
Wow. Back in a minute.
Waiting while you tried to...
More horrifying and real news. And, of course, in that first hour we talked with Dr. Bob Thiel about the candidacy of Hitler, Iraq, and Clinton. These events here happening using nukes in our alliance with Saudi Arabia against Yemen, a Houthi Shiite community linked up with Iran and Russia, and all these Shiite communities and nations with them. What we're seeing here is the gathering of the great Sunni Shiite war that even the Muslim prophets prophesy is going to bring out the forwarding or bring forth of the Huda of the what's called the Imam Mahdi, or the final Mahdi.
Yeah, right.
And people need to understand what this means. These people are literalists. In a technical and scientific term, they're literalists, which means they believe they actually need to bring forth this conflict. And our globalists believe they want to have a Sunni caliphate controlling all these Muslim nations from Libya right through all the way through the Middle East. this is going to get very, very ugly before it gets catastrophic.
Yeah.
And
and remember, the Red Crescent, which is the arm of the Red Cross that functions in Islamic countries, the Red Crescent said yesterday that tens of children in Yemen were killed and many others injured by a chemical warfare attack dropped by Royal Saudi Air Force aircraft in Yemen. So which is, I'm sure, the reason why the Saudis said that particular the airstrike program had ended. But they're about to invade and using their best forces. But here's something else that is really very, very dangerous. Okay, this armada that is farming as we speak off the shores of Yemen, it's headed by the USS Teddy Roosevelt, which the U.S. Navy, which our Navy calls the big stick, because, Teddy Roosevelt, as president, said, walk softly and carry a big stick.
Right.
It has a Ticonderoga-class cruiser and two Aegis-class destroyers, at least two.
Right.
In addition to that, there's another big flat top, another carrier, which is an assault carrier, the USS Iwo Jima, and several other assault ships with an entire Marine Expeditionary group, which is like a combat regiment. That's designed to go in with tanks and amphibious vehicles. So we have the ability to put hundreds of extremely well-armed Marines in very quickly. Right. In addition, there's all kind of other supporter ships. We think at least 9 that the Navy is admitting to, but those are surface ships. With all aircraft supercarriers, there's 1 to 2, usually sometimes 3, nuclear-powered hunter-killer attack submarines, and sometimes with the Iwo Jima type assault carriers. So there's probably somewhere between 1 to 3 nuclear-powered U.S. Navy subs there. And they have cruise missiles with atomic warheads. And, of course, the USS Teddy Roosevelt has a large arsenal of atomic weapons as well. Now, we may or may not use those atomic weapons, but the point is the Iranian Navy has a guided missile destroyer and a couple support ships in that area. And remember, they're at sea. This is the perfect setup for a false flag event. Nobody's around. It's all on radar. And if there are, or we claim, or what other, that 1 or more missiles are fired at any of our ships, all hell will break loose. The force that we have in that particular area, I don't think will be taken down by anything that the Iranians have. Is it very different a couple hundred miles away in the Gulf of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, because there the Iranians have a great number of small subs with the underwater rocket missiles, et cetera, and land-based missiles, and just all kind of mines that are actually missiles that they can activate, and they can do a great deal of damage to any U.S. Navy ship in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf. But off of Yemen, I believe we have the tactical and strategic advantage. But nevertheless, any action, we sink their destroyer. If we attempt to board their destroyer, and 2 of the major newspapers in the United States have said that, this morning that we're going to interdict and stop any Iranian warship or ship in that area. If we do this, then you could very, very easily and very quickly get into a situation where the Iranians respond by closing off the Strait of Hormuz. And if that happens, Katie, bar the door.
Well, let me explain something supernatural. And people need to know that the natural and supernatural do converge in this time. The very first event that's going to mean that we're entering, without getting into details, the time of troubles, is the closure of the Strait, which you have technically just laid out all the reasons why it is going to happen shortly. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but I can tell you technically, if they continue to increase the conflict in the Gulf of Aden, the area where the Iranians do have strength, and they just need to literally call their commanders on their military phones, and they have enough weapon systems and missiles aimed in that 1.5 mile across or 1.25 mile across strait. And even Lloyd's of London will just say, we got a phone call that the Iranians have turned on their missile systems at the Strait of Hormuz, and they don't even need to shoot one bullet. It's the end of any oil traffic, which is 1/3 of the oil traffic in the planet coming through that strait.
Exactly.
It's over.
All ships have to go to port or anchor immediately, because if they don't, they will lose all insurance.
Right, and so what I expect is it won't be the Iranians, it'll be Lloyd's of London that'll close the strait. And when the Iranians do this, they will hold ransom the entire Middle East, because all these countries, including Saudi Arabia, that ship most of their oil through that strait, will be immediately strangled. And this will precipitate the move by Saudi Arabia. And we had Bill Salas at a new prophecy conference that are coming up in a few weeks, I think, in Florida. And Bill has said very clearly, using the scriptures, that, and he's a very good scripture and biblical analyst of this, is that there's a coming Middle East war, and he actually showed scripturally proof that the burden of the desert by the sea, which is Saudi Arabia, will be destroyed by fire. It also shows in the Bible that the eastern port of the western portions of Iran, which is Elam, the ancient kingdom, will also be destroyed, which is the area of the Bashir nuclear reactor. I belong to the Physicians for Social Responsibility for 30 plus years. And if that reactor's hit, it'll make Fukushima Daiichi, which is the biggest extinction level event in history and will continue for thousands of years, it'll make it look like a garden party. The amount of radioactive release.
Picnic. And guess what? Guess who's downwind from that?
Us.
China. China will lose probably several million of its citizens.
Oh, no. Tim, they've calculated out, and this is from our Physicians for Social Responsibility and Nuclear Scientists, if the Bashir reactors were hit, and we've been working on this for some years, the amount of radiation release would immediately make the population of Myanmar, southern Myanmar, which is Burma, most of the coastal areas of China where all the industry is, South Korea, and Japan, radioactive dead zones.
Gee.
Welcome back, and Tim, you had some remarkably what I call prescient and clear explanation.
If I can remember exactly
I think you had I call it
sequence.
It's almost like you had a lightning bolt from.
We were talking off the air, Dr. Bill, about the Islamic. They have an Antichrist and the Savior coming at the end, they believe. And it's called, what is it? I always mispronounce it. Mudi or...
the Mahdi.
Mahdi, okay. So you have these two main groups of Islamic fanatics going at one another. Now, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but I'm a Christian, and to me, the entire Islamic faith is a demonic.
Actually, we aren't sorry. We aren't. No, let me correct you, Tim. It says in the Bible that we who are saved are the stench of death to the unsaved. We want to offend you. In fact, when yesterday afternoon I gave my little talk and I offended some people, I am glad that we had a non-apathetic response. Any strong emotion, including hatred and the willingness to spit, to me is a good thing. If we can stir you up, maybe you'll actually repent, realize you're in a cult and you're going to die soon, and not just a physical death, a spiritual death, which is annihilation. And Islam is going to bring destruction.
Also, we're getting off the topic.
So I'm not really sorry. I think we've got to.
I'm trying to remember it here.
Right, okay. But we got to be not. We're not going to be not sorry.
The Israelis also tell us about what the Israeli Air Force, when they swear in their people, what they sing.
Well, when they go up into the Masada and they get their wings, they go and sing the Vilna Gaon. So since the 1967 war, they go up on Masada and they sing the song called the Vilna Gaon, which says, translated from Hebrew, when Rush crosses from the Bosporus to the Mediterranean, Russia, put on your Shabbat or Sabbath clothes, for Messiah HaMashiach is coming. And they feel the first coming of Messiah is coming. Their Hebrew Jewish Messiah.
And it means, in reality, their Messiah is Jesus Christ. They don't recognize it.
Right. Of course, they've returned like the fig tree in unbelief, which is why the nation of Israel is going to go for, it says, the blood shall be up to the horses' bridles. Israel shall be a place of destruction and death. So it says it shall take 7 months picking up the radioactive bones of the dead between Haifa and the valley of Jezreel that runs all the way to the Dead Sea. That's what's coming.
Yes. Okay, so we have all this. Now, what I was, and I asked you if you remembered your South or your Latin American history, and
right.
You did. The Aztec nation, their emperor in what is now Mexico City, when the Spaniards came over, and they were searching for a city of gold and all this, and their military force that they put in was, I think, 100 and some men. It really was quite small. They had horses, which scared the hell out of the native people. They had some very primitive firearms, thunder sticks, that scared the natives. But the Aztec Empire had thousands and thousands of trained combatants. They ruled a very large area. But there was this old theory, this old prophecy that someday men would come from the sea, light-skinned men, and would conquer. So basically, they kind of laid down. They and they were overwhelmed. The emperor was eventually killed, and they were looted by a tiny force. Well, in many ways, I see some analogy here. You have the Islam groups believing in something. You have the Jewish, and then you have us Christians. Well, you know what? This is all going by prophecy. I mean, this has all been laid out. It's in the book of Revelation. This is happening. This is not, we know this, and Christians have known this for a couple thousand years. And it's happening now. Now, I cannot definitively tell you, based on my analysis or anybody else's analysis, that the event that's happening as now, the farming of this big armada right off of Yemen, and that this will be a trigger event. It very easily could be, but I can't definitively tell you that it will or won't be. But I can tell you where we're headed, and I can tell you that the sea of red flags, of warning flags, goes on for miles. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you've done an amazing analysis of this, Tim. What we have to do is tie this all together. People said have to understand this. When Jesus said, Jesus, the incarnation of the Most High God, the Father in the flesh is the best way to describe Jesus. Yeshua, which means the breath that comes into life and lives among us. Emmanuel, when he said he is the way, the truth, and life, there's not a different truth, whether it's astrophysics, biochemistry, scalar, space technology. Like, for example, we have a near space object that's passing Earth today. It actually has a possibility it might strike us. We have also CMEs coming from the sun. What people need to understand, there's only one truth. And when you, with your Christian mind and your geopolitical and historical analysis, look at this boldly, and your first witness, your intellect, tells you that, and the Bible says to your spirit that this is also true, you have two witnesses. You have a witness in your mind, which is an intellect that God gave you to use, and your spirit that tells you as a believer that Jesus is coming, but he's calling us as soldiers to stand up and tell the truth and do the right thing. We have right now, for example, the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. We have Obama destroying the country. We have our open borders with Muslims at the rate of 100 to 150,000 per year being brought into here from Somalia and other Muslim nations. Yeah, many of them are actually...
Don't forget the Mexican gangs, the millions of Mexicans.
Right, and not just the Mexican gangs.
And these gangs are spreading all over America, and they're so vicious, they hunt cops and hunt cops' families.
Well, I have a feeling that when America turns on these people, they will wish the devil himself was after them, because
their half-life will
with
be
Jade Hellman, I bring it on, Jade Hellman, that they're trying to do in Texas. The Texans have to vote every June to actually stay in the Union. If Texans someday, and it could be that day is coming, decide that they are Texans first and Americans second, it's the end of America. And we have to understand, when we see the American military pushing homosexuality and sexual perversion, destroying the readiness of our military by upgrading technology, like what you said, to the proper types of carrier groups instead of these giant sitting ducks, sitting themselves in the Gulf of Aden like that is just a formula to take our young men and women and a lot of hardware and have it go to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. what will happen, too, when we decide to take off the Syrians, and I'm going to say this again so people understand, because I have Syrian blood. My great-grandfather owned a caravan that traveled between Damascus, Syria, and China twice a year with my great-grandmother. And I can tell you, she walked beside the camels, carrying things all the way to China twice a year. These are tough people. The toughest people on earth are Russians and Syrians. If you think the Italians are bad and the Sicilians are bad, you do not want to cross Syrians or Russians.
Mm-hmm. They can be.
Now, I'll just tell you a little story. I'm going to say a story here. I have a friend in Special Forces, and he was there in Lebanon, and they attacked some Russian diplomats in Lebanon, these Muslim maniacs. And the Russians found out the names of the people that attacked the Russian diplomats, and they excised all the sexual body parts and put them in plastic bags in front of the doorsteps of the Muslim terrorists, and warned them that if they even look sideways at any Russians again, all of their relatives out to 5 generations would end up in the same type of bags on their doorsteps, and no one ever bothered the Russians again.
Well, you know, when the Iranians had taken over our embassy and were holding our people hostage, they were beginning. They also sent people outside of the Soviet embassy in Tehran, and the Soviet ambassador went to see the Ayatollah, and he looked at his watch. He very carefully looked at his wristwatch, and he said, "It's now 11 o'clock. I think it was in the morning." He said, "If this is not resolved at 12 noon," and I'm paraphrasing the exact time. I don't remember, but he said at 12 noon, Iran will cease to exist.
Yeah, and he means it. Now, I can tell you that there will be a Syrian that will. The Syrian is going to start taking order
for all the demonstrators to get the hell away from the Soviet embassy as fast as they could.
Exactly.
They talked to them in a language that they understood.
We've been patient.
Discovered working as a physician, taking care of employees working at different, highly compartmentalized, of extremely classified compartments of the U.S. government, which is why a lot of time people would come to me with their medical issues and want to discuss other issues in the compartmentalized areas of, say, Space Command, NORAD, Schriever Air Force Base, etc. And I discovered 3 things. Number 1, our government doesn't talk to each other. U.S. Space Command doesn't talk to the Air Force doesn't talk to the Navy. Number 2, they dumb down the message so that people don't know what's really going on, even if they have good, solid intelligence. And number 3, they plain out lie. And there's a lot of power games going on as to who's actually going to have this territory or that territory or control of information. What's happening, and I want you to address this, Tim, the response to an attack on the Houthi tribesmen by dropping this nuke and destroying them and now going in for a full-force invasion may not be in the Gulf of Aden. It could be in Syrians deciding, as I gave an analogy over the break, of a Syrian commander who's trained by Russians with the hypersonic cruise missiles, being up late, drinking, and so getting more and more angry now that he knows that they killed innocent Shiite children with a nuclear device in the capital of the Shiite Houthi tribesman area. And now they're in a full-force invasion backed by America. He gets up after being asleep after 2 a.m. at 6:15, sees the sun rising. He's still got a bit of a hangover from drinking last night, but he's so angry he's actually biting hard enough, his enamel's cracking off his teeth. And he just tells his juniors to lock on because he's discovered by radar that America's carrier group is now within the 180-mile radius to lock on and send it at Mach 8 missiles that people standing on the deck smelling the nice fresh air of the Mediterranean, not knowing that's the last cup of coffee they're ever going to have on the planet Earth.
Yeah,
and our Navy,
our systems cannot defeat the Russian refer Alexander.
Now this is for you military people out there.
Missile, because it is so fast. It is several times faster than a supersonic speeding bullet.
I want to quote Eisenhower. Tim, I want to quote Eisenhower on this, and I want your response. Eisenhower, being a military person, never wanted to put the military in harm's way unless he knew he could defeat the enemy. And, in fact, if we had somebody like Eisenhower prosecuting the Vietnam War, he would have had it done in about 2 months. Because he would have prosecuted, and as they say, when you bring in the military...
We could have won it in 2 months had we won.
Right, because what you do, by the way, when you bring in the military, you kill people and break things permanently. And the person that prosecuted the Vietnam War purposely didn't want to win it. If you want to win the war, and again, this is run by transnational corporations, you kill a lot of people, hopefully only the people that really need to die, but unfortunately there's a lot of collateral damage, and you break things so thoroughly that the enemy can't even get up from a lying position.
That's what war is, and if you're not,
that's what war is. War is very ugly.
Men in harm's way,
and you don't put men in harm's way by trying to police the state, because then you get blown up by IEDs and other things.
While we're talking about the subject of harm's way, I have a list here of the principal U.S. Navy ships that, as we speak, are sailing into harm's way.
Right.
Now, these are not ships that are in the Persian Gulf. We have a number there, and they are really in harm's way. But these are the ships that are heading to the shores of Aden, or the shores of Yemen. Aden is part of Yemen. Okay, the USS Theodore Roosevelt supercarrier, the USS Normandy, a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, the guided missile destroyers USS Forrest Sherman and the USS Winston S. Churchill, the Iwo Jima assault carrier, as well as the USS Fort McHenry, LSD, the USS New York, LPD, and the entire U.S. Marine Corps 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. There's also two Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships, the USS Dexterous and the USS Sentry, in addition to some likely submarines and perhaps some additional ships.
Right.
These we know are there, and of course the U.S. Navy isn't disclosing a lot. Now, we are talking about several thousand people just on the supercarrier, and all told, we're probably, I don't know, with the Marines, maybe 20,000 sailors and Marines that are going into harm's way.
Tim, you're familiar. You're familiar with the 30 kilowatt targeting lasers to hit drones, and the Orlikon Industries high-speed anti-missile systems that we have. The detection time limit between the speed of these missiles coming in at Mach 8 and the ability of these tracking and shoot down laser and other guided systems cannot even hit 10% of these missiles coming in. We are completely defenseless against the systems that someone like a Syrian commander who is biting and cracking his teeth in the morning is so angry that we've killed little Shiite children in the Houthi tribesmen.
Well, if it comes from Syria, it won't hit those particular ships. I just
right, but what I'm saying is that
other ships that will be targeted, and other Americans that will die. Now, of course, that will set off.
Well, that'll also make them have to move their
globalists and Zionists want. Israel is going to end up being destroyed, and I've tried to make this point till I'm blue in the face to the right people, but it doesn't seem. And many of their own people know this. That's why so many people have opposed.
Well, Barry Chamish is
out of Yahoo.
Barry Chamish. They tried to kill him at least 3 times for telling the truth as a journalist, and he proved about Mr. Shimon Peres how he killed the previous Prime Minister of Israel, and he proved lots of it, that the labor Zionists, which are basically satanic communists, ran the state of Israel and actually made alliances with the SS squad and the Luftwaffe of the German military, which is why they had this agreement that they wiped out all the other, we call Hebrew Jewish organizations. Many of them were, quote, religious, and even were non-Babylonian, you want to call non-Talmudic Babylonian Jews.
I think the Nazis were prepared to let them go.
Well, they already made an agreement.
Camps, but some of their own hardcore Zionists didn't want that.
No. What happened is 122,000 of the SS were Jewish, Sabbatean, Satanistic atheists that followed the Satan. People need to know that. They need to know that the arrangement to actually set up the state of Israel was an arrangement between the British and the German, even during and after the First World War. And that, in fact, when
it was Rothschild-driven.
Rothschild-driven. They should call it Rothschild land. Why do they call it Rothschild land? Okay. So,
and I'll tell you, I want to tell you, the globalists, the Rothschilds and Warburgs and Schiffs and so forth, they don't give a rat's butt about all the people in Israel.
No. In fact, Barry said his own family, because he's divorced now, who wouldn't leave Israel. He's grieving for them already in advance of the fact he knows the state is going to be destroyed. Every time I have Barry on, he tells me, as a Jew, as one who fought in 1982 in the Israeli Defense Force when they went into Lebanon, as one who's telling the truth, he sees destruction coming to the state. He says, we're finished. And with people like Obama, and again, I remember I mentioned this about the fact we have to stand up beside Israel, even though they're an out-of-control son or brother. We have to literally annex the state of Israel so we can get control of their military. I think, in some aspects, we are far less aggressive than we have to be. If I was the commander, there wouldn't be a live Muslim extremist on the planet. We would have a mark on them.
The problem is, it's been the reverse. Their extremists have annexed us.
If I was a commander, if I was a commander-in-chief, if you literally professed that you were an extreme Muslim extremist, you would have days to live before you're going to visit Allah and get your 72.
You would have hours to live because they would do to you.
No, they wouldn't. No, I guarantee you, I have supernatural protection from the Most High God, and their life on this planet, unless they repented, would be very short indeed and very vicious death. I guarantee that. The problem is, you see, we don't have enough real Christians that are what I call have the sword in their right hand, like Joshua Christians, which I am, and their Bible on the other hand to pray for your enemy. But if your enemy won't repent and they want to attack you, slice them down. And we need to do some slicing.
We're in a very dicey time period, spiritually as well as strategically.
Tim,
and keep your eyes, folks, on what's happening off of...
well, you know what it says in the Bible, turn your other cheek? In the Middle East, people know this, and people here in the West don't. The first cheek is a cheek of a child. You discipline. The cheek of the other cheek is called the cheek of death. And Jesus said, turn the other cheek. It means, I am your brother. Do not strike this cheek, because if you do, we have to have a struggle to the death where one of us dies. That's what Jesus really said. He's saying, I'm your brother. If you strike this cheek, we have to have a death struggle until one of us dies. That's where we're at.
Yep.
Turn the other cheek, people. Take out your sword, get ready, and pray for our enemies.